talk is very different from the talks you've had this morning. So if you want to have a little snooze, I won't be offended. I usually get very upset when I see undergraduates sleeping in lectures, but I think you're allowed to have a little break from today's events. Now, I'm leading Security Futures, the component that we've created that's part of Security Lancaster. And this talk is in many ways an invitation and an advertisement for this component of Security Lancaster, and a kind of invitation to get people involved in the project. And Security Futures emerged very much from a recognition that universities could do more to collaborate not only with organisations outside of the university, but also to collaborate more with other academics within the university. Because the way that universities are organised is in terms of different faculties. And these different faculties are in many ways like different kingdoms, with different competitions, rivalries, different economies and different budgets. And this kind of translates down to the level of academic dialogue. So in my 20 years or so working and studying in universities, I'd never spent time talking to computer scientists. But I teach in international relations, and there was a sense that if we want to understand the future of global politics, the future of the global economy, we need to have this kind of interaction. And this interaction could also be useful more generally. We could provide something, a kind of forum for research and discussion that could bring in different organizations. And so we kind of created this to bridge what we saw as a bit of a gap. And it was also to use the expertise of universities and different faculties and different subjects to think about future problems, emerging security problems, problems that we don't want to think about, problems that we can't really kind of make sense of at this point in history. Let's kind of see what are the emerging problems that we're going to have in the 21st century, and to kind of use all the resources that we've got at Lancaster to try and make sense of what's going on. And to do this in a way that brought together criminologists, sociologists, lawyers, computer scientists, to kind of have this debate about where we're heading in terms of security politics. And I think, underlying this, underlying the reasons for creating this centre were kind of what for me are 5 really important challenges that we need to address. And the first is something you probably all know about, Moore's law. And here, it's a very controversial idea, Moore's law, but it's basically the idea that you're seeing a rapid acceleration in the power and capacity of computing. And it's leading to an exponential growth in computing that is creating non-linear events. So the exponential growth changes what we might see as linear growth in this area. So we're confronted by problems and developments that take us by surprise. And maybe an example would be the London riots, where young people were using social media, their Blackberries, as a way of organising their activities. Now, I got the sense, at least, that following the kind of policy response to the riots, that politicians were very much taken unaware by these events. It was something unprecedented. And I would see that as an example of how the kind of rapid acceleration of technology presents us with new problems. And it creates kind of radical and disruptive change in many sectors of our economy and in the organisations that we work in. An example might be the music industry. There are some people who work for large media companies that made lots of money during 60s, 70s and 80s, and then they're confronted in the last 10 years with a different set of technologies that kind of pose really difficult questions for how they're going to make money. And so, I don't think it's a very good place right now to be working in the music industry, because they're trying to think, well, how can we deal with this really radical and disruptive change? And I think that applies to a whole range of organisations. And one of the things I'm interested to know is, in terms of people who worked in the music industry, did they see this on the horizon? Yeah, or was it this kind of really radical event that no one really could see as a realistic kind of new business model, downloading music for free? And also in universities, one of the things I'm being encouraged to do at the moment is create online courses, distance learning. Yeah? And so 10 years from now, I don't really know what the mode of delivery will be for a lot of the courses I teach. I could be sat in a room with, a big kind of conference room with 10 screens teaching people around the world. Because there's radical kind of changes that are impacting on universities, which have often sold themselves in terms of tradition. You come to a campus and you get this traditional education. But the rapid technological change is changing that. And so we want to try and create a space where we can think, okay, what is on the horizon with this radical, disruptive, non-linear change? And the second assumption that we kind of take seriously is the idea that technology is often not used as the designers intended. There's a kind of nice view of how human beings are going to use new technology, but it often doesn't kind of materialize in that way. People use and abuse technology. And an example that came to me recently is that one of the early attempts to use this kind of thinking about the future that we're developing occurred on the MSc in cybersecurity here at Lancaster. And basically the plan was take students and get them to think about security problems in 2019. And they had to create a scenario in any sector of the economy or in any sector of security and describe what would happen or how a technology would be used and abused in 2019. One of the groups did a case study on emerging changes in healthcare. And by the end of it, it was clear that what they'd done is create the outline of a potential future company. And so working with people in the Info Lab, they created a company on medical security called Sanitas. And one of the aspects of their research which they were focusing on was how easy it would be to disrupt activity in the NHS and in technologies like pacemakers, a variety of medical technologies. And one of the people they approached in the early stages in the health sector said to them, yeah, but why would anyone want to do this? Yeah? Why would anyone want to hack into someone's pacemaker? And our assumption is, well, human beings don't act in the way that policymakers and politicians would like them to. And so that's a kind of key assumption. And I think part of the reason why people in the healthcare didn't really take or seem to take seriously the warnings that they were making is because of the speed with which companies want to implement new technologies. Yeah, their kind of interest is in creating new products, getting them to market as quickly as possible, and the glitches that we could find in these new products are the things we want to look for. What are the glitches and the flaws in all these wonderful solutions that are being implemented across government, across our complex states to make life easier. The other kind of justification for this way of thinking is that we live in a time of economic uncertainty where the debate is as to whether this is a temporary crisis that we're seeing in much of the Western world or that there are deeper structural kind of restructurings going on what type of society that is going to emerge from that at the end of it. I think, in some ways there's a kind of vision of the future that is the type of vision you see in Wired magazine in the adverts. Yeah, the nice kind of future of amazing technology, amazing economic growth. But what if that isn't the future that we're heading to? Yeah? What type of social problems are going to be on the horizon, and how are all these other factors going to play into it? what are social problems going to look like in an age of Moore's law, of rapid technological innovation and acceleration? And finally, geopolitical change. One of the cliches about global politics is that the Cold War was a time of certainty. Yeah? The Cold War was a time when you knew who the enemies were, you knew how international politics was organized. But we're now at a point where things seem much more uncertain and unclear. Now, what type of geopolitical system are we heading into? Is it going to be the post-American world? Is it going to be a new Cold War? Is it going to be a multipolar world? The only certainty, I think, is that we're going to see increasingly complex problems. The kinds of problems we see with cybersecurity, problems like climate change, problems that emerge from technological progress, and problems that emerge from the increasing complexity of new technology. And, you know, one of the uncertainties is what this new international system will mean in terms of solutions to problems. Yeah? What, in a world that is no longer this kind of nice, kind of organized Cold War world, you know, how are we going to deal with these complex problems? Yeah? What's geopolitics going to look like in 20, 30 years? Yeah? And so, you know, our assumption is that these are the kind of 5 challenges that states need to think about, corporations need to think about, even small businesses need to think about, because they're so radical in their disruptiveness that they change all aspects of contemporary life. And so what we want to do is to create ways to get people to think about the future. Underlying this is the idea that people in organizations get habituated to certain ways of looking at the world. Yeah? You're in an organization and there is a kind of status quo in terms of how you look at the future of technology, the future of the economy. And the idea is that, you know, if you take people out of their kind of traditional, normal setting and get them to work on projects with a mixture of people, computer scientists, lawyers, political scientists, you might generate new kind of critical ideas about the future. Yeah? Ideas that are maybe ideas about the world that wouldn't be permitted in an organization. But what we're interested in doing is kind of problem solving and kind of thinking about the future in a very open way, because that's what universities are good at. Yeah, we can assemble teams of people and get them to think about emerging problems without their own agenda. Yeah? Because we're not kind of in the organizations that we're thinking about. And so, you know, one of the techniques that we use is known as design fiction, and that comes from the design world, where, you know, designers and architects thinking about similar problems of Moore's law, rapid technological change, have been developing innovative techniques to kind of open up thinking about the future. And so this can involve, you know, creating quite innovative and imaginative scenarios about the future. You know, create a short film, create a short story that's rooted in the kind of technological know-how, but is then a way of presenting debates about the future in an innovative way. So hopefully contributing to debate in organizations and in society more generally. But also I think the process of getting people to be creative is the way of opening up kind of new insights into the problems that we confront. And so we work with a variety of organizations, from very small businesses through to much larger organizations. But what we're interested in is trying to map the kind of emerging problems that people aren't really talking about, but, you know, are kind of there in front of us. But, you know, you need this open discussion to try and get the kind of ball rolling. So anyway, if people have any questions or any ideas for projects, I'd really love to hear about them after the presentations. Thank you.